I stared at the new pay stub, my breath catching my throat. A 10% pay cut. No warning. No explanation. When I confronted him, my boss leaned back in his leather chair, laced his fingers behind his head, and said, "Richard, be grateful you still work here. People your age should be retiring anyway." My ears rang. My face burned. The entire office fell silent, pretending not to listen. I felt stripped of dignity in a place I had given 4 decades of my life. My name is Richard Halloway, 62 years old, and this moment rewrote everything I thought I knew about loyalty, respect, and fairness. What my boss didn't know was that I had built this company from nothing alongside the founder. What he couldn't possibly imagine was a secret I had kept hidden for 15 years, a secret that would soon turn his arrogant smirk into absolute horror. I walked back to my cubicle, my hands slightly shaking. Every coworker kept their eyes glued to their screens. Nobody said a word, but everyone heard. Everyone always hears. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I sat down at my ancient desk. My computer, purchased in 2010, took 3 minutes to boot up while my younger colleagues had brand new MacBooks. My chair squeaked. My monitor flickered. Everything about my workspace screamed expendable. I opened my email and found a message from HR confirming the pay reduction. Due to company restructuring and performance evaluations, your compensation has been adjusted accordingly. Performance evaluations I had never received. Restructuring I had never been consulted about. 23 years old when I started here. Now 62. 40 years of mornings arriving early, staying late, missing family dinners, sacrificing weekends. All reduced to a corporate euphemism. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. "Happy birthday, Dad. Can't wait to celebrate tonight." I had completely forgotten. Today was my birthday. Some gift this turned out to be. By lunchtime, whispers spread to the office like wildfire. He cut Richard's pay? Why would he do that to him? I overheard everything from the break room. 20 years ago, I was the man people sought for advice. Senior employees asked me to mentor their teams. Junior staff brought me complex problems nobody else could solve. Now, I felt like a burden they were waiting to phase out. My boss, Trevor Ashford, had joined the company 3 years ago as vice president of operations. Young, ambitious, MBA from an elite school. He wore expensive suits and spoke in buzzwords. Synergy, disruption, optimization. Within months, he started replacing veteran employees with fresh graduates willing to work longer hours for less pay. I watched him through the glass walls of his corner office, laughing on the phone, probably talking to his country club friends about his latest power move. He looked at older employees the way people look at outdated technology, necessary once, but ready for the landfill. My boss's favorite phrase lately had become unbearable. Fresh blood brings new ideas. Translation? You're old, Richard. He gave important projects to younger employees who barely understood them. The Anderson merger, which I had spent 18 months developing relationships for, went to a 28-year-old who couldn't tell the difference between EBITDA and EBITDA. The international expansion strategy one design went to someone who needed GPS to find the conference room. I wasn't just disrespected anymore. I was systematically erased. During a strategy meeting last month, I mentioned a similar market situation from 2008 that could inform our approach. Trevor cut me off. "Richard, we're focused on forward-thinking strategies, not ancient history." Ancient history. The global financial crisis was ancient history. The younger employees laughed nervously, unsure whether to join in or defend me. They chose silence, the safe option. I didn't blame them. Jobs were scarce, and Trevor controlled their futures. In a meeting 2 weeks ago, I presented a report I had spent days perfecting. Market analysis, competitor strategies, risk assessments, all meticulously researched and documented. Trevor cut me off mid-sentence. "We'll let the younger team handle the numbers." "Richard, why don't you just observe?" "Observe? Like I was a trainee instead of someone who'd been analyzing market trends since before these kids were born. Laughter followed. Not loud, just enough to sting. My jaw clenched so tight, I heard my teeth grind together. Kyle, a recent hire who still lived with his parents, took over my presentation. He stumbled through the slides, mispronouncing terminology, mixing up percentages. Nobody corrected him. Trevor nodded approvingly throughout, as if incompetence delivered with youthful confidence was superior to decades of expertise. After the meeting, Kyle approached my desk. "Hey, Mr. Holloway, thanks for the research. Really solid work." At least someone recognized it. But recognition without credit was just another form of theft. Trevor began assigning me impossible deadlines, then scolded me for taking too long. A comprehensive market report that typically required 2 weeks, he wanted it in 3 days. Financial projections that demanded coordination across 4 departments, due tomorrow morning. Every mistake he made, he found a way to pin on me. When the Peterson account experienced delays because Trevor approved incorrect specifications, he told senior management I had provided faulty data. When quarterly numbers fell short because his aggressive expansion drained resources, he blamed outdated operational methods. Every success I delivered, he dismissed as luck or basic competency. I documented everything in a personal folder at home. Emails showing my correct recommendations ignored. Meeting notes proving his decisions caused the problems he blamed me for. Time-stamped files demonstrating I had warned him about consequences he later denied knowing about, not for revenge, just for protection. Or so I told myself at the time. Last month, Trevor did the unthinkable. He swapped me out of the Harrison Technologies contract, one I had nurtured for 12 years, and gave it to Bethany, who had only been with the company 6 months. Harrison Technologies represented 18% of our annual revenue. I had personally recruited their CEO when she was just starting her company. We had quarterly dinners. Our families exchanged Christmas cards. The relationship was built on trust that took over a decade to establish. The client, Patricia Harrison, called me confused. "Richard, why aren't you leading this anymore? Did something happen?" I had no answer. Shame washed over me like ice water. Just company restructuring. Patricia. Bethany is very capable. Patricia's skepticism carried through the phone. "If you say so. But Richard, you know you can always call me directly if something's wrong." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the phone for 10 minutes afterward. How had I let it come to this? Reduced to reassuring clients about my own replacement. Late one evening 2 weeks ago, I worked past 9 o'clock, finishing a report Trevor needed for an early morning presentation. The office was empty except for the janitorial staff and, apparently, Trevor and 2 managers in the conference room. I spotted them through the glass walls as I walked toward the elevator. They were laughing, drinking expensive whiskey from the executive cabinet. I wouldn't have paid attention, except I heard my name. Curiosity and dread pulled me closer. I stood just outside the door, hidden by shadows. "Old man should have retired already," Trevor joked, his voice carrying easily. "But he's too stubborn or too broke. Probably both." The managers, Hannah and Preston, laughed obediently. "You really cut his pay?" Preston asked. 10%, Trevor confirmed proudly. Sent a message to the other dinosaurs. Adapt or become extinct. They laughed harder. My heart cracked. But simultaneously, my resolve hardened like cooling steel. I didn't yell. I didn't confront him again. What would be the point? Men like Trevor don't respond to emotion, only to consequences. Instead, I went home to my quiet townhouse, sat at my dining table with a glass of scotch, and stared at my hands. These hands had signed contracts worth millions. These hands had built systems still running the company. These hands, weathered and aging, still held power Trevor couldn't imagine. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "If you want to play this game, I'll play it smarter." Revenge didn't have to be loud. It only had to be precise. I opened my laptop and access files I hadn't touched in 15 years. Document protected by passwords and encryption. Legal papers stored in my safe deposit box. Evidence of something Trevor was about to discover the hard way. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney, Vincent Palmer. Richard, the annual review is coming up. Do you want to proceed? I typed back, yes, it's time. The next morning, I shifted into strategy mode. For decades in business had taught me patience and precision. Trevor was operating on arrogance and assumption, the weakest foundation possible. I reviewed every file, every project, every contract I had ever touched. I knew this company better than anyone alive. I knew its cracks, its vulnerabilities, and most importantly, Trevor's blind spots. He had been hired by the board 3 years ago after our founder, Malcolm Brennan, stepped down due to health issues. Malcolm had built Brennan Industries from a garage startup in 1984 to a $200 million operation. I had been with him since year 2, when we were still working out of a rented warehouse with folding tables as desks. What the board didn't know, what Trevor certainly didn't know, was a private agreement Malcolm and I had made 15 years ago. An agreement that made me more than just an employee. Much more, Trevor had a dangerous habit of approving financial proposals without reading them. Sloppy, arrogant, trusting his gut over analysis. In business, that's not confidence, it's negligence. I documented everything. Every hastily approved budget. Every contract signed without legal review. Every decision made in contradiction to policy. Not to expose him immediately. That would be satisfying but inefficient. No, I was building a comprehensive record, waiting for the perfect moment when his pattern of carelessness would intersect with serious consequences. That moment was approaching faster than he realized. I scheduled a quiet lunch with Vincent Palmer, my attorney for 30 years. We met at a discreet restaurant across town. The shareholders' agreement is ironclad, Vincent confirmed, reviewing documents over grilled salmon. Malcolm's shares transfer to the trust exactly as specified. Trevor has no idea. And the timing? I asked. The annual review is in 3 weeks. Perfect opportunity. I nodded, sipping water. Let's proceed carefully. I want this done right. I stopped volunteering ideas in meetings. Let Trevor talk. Let him brag. Let him take on tasks he didn't understand. In Monday's strategy session, he proposed an aggressive acquisition of competitor, clearly not understanding their debt structure. I said nothing. When he outlined expansion into markets with regulatory nightmares, I remained silent. When he promised clients delivery timelines physically impossible to meet, I simply took notes. He thought I was finally getting out of the way, accepting my diminished role. He actually thanked me after one meeting. See, Richard? Things run smoother when you're not always pushing back. I smiled politely, just trying to be helpful. Trevor. What he didn't realize was that I was giving him rope, plenty of rope, and he was enthusiastically tying it around his own neck. The younger employees noticed my silence. Kyle approached me in the break room. Mr. Holloway, are you okay? You've been really quiet lately. Just fine, Kyle. Sometimes it's better to listen than speak. 3 days later, Patricia Harrison from Harrison Technologies reached out privately. Richard, the numbers in Bethany's proposal don't match what we discussed. Something's off. I stayed late that night, recalculating the entire project. Trevor had pushed Bethany to inflate projected returns by 40% to make the deal look better. Unsustainable, impossible, and borderline fraudulent. I sent Patricia a corrected analysis marked confidential consultation. She was grateful. This is why I wanted you on this project. Richard, Bethany's nice, but she doesn't have your depth. I responded professionally. Just try to ensure accuracy. Please use your judgment on how to proceed. What I didn't tell Patricia was that I documented everything. Trevor's pressure on Bethany, the inflated numbers, the original realistic projections I had prepared that were ignored, all saved securely. Trevor remained blissfully unaware that his flagship project was built on fiction. Younger employees began coming to me for help off the record. They couldn't openly defy Trevor, but they knew quality guidance when they saw it. Bethany appeared at my desk one afternoon, close to tears. "Mr. Halloway, I'm drowning. Trevor wants me to present the Harrison renewal next week, and honestly, I don't fully understand the technical specifications." I helped her, thoroughly, patiently, not undermining Trevor directly, just ensuring the work was done correctly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know why Trevor took you off this. Everyone knows you're the expert. Just helping a colleague." I replied gently, "But people talk to those they trust." And as I helped more young employees, they started sharing things. Concerns about Trevor's decisions, worries about unrealistic targets, questions about why experienced staff were being sidelined. Information flowed to me like water finding its level. During a casual conversation in the break room, another coworker, Marcus from finance, whispered something important. "Richard, between us, Trevor misreported revenue projections to the board last quarter, made it look like we exceeded targets when we actually fell short. Are you certain?" I asked quietly. I ran the numbers 3 times. He moved some Q4 revenue forward to make Q3 look better. It's all going to collapse in the next quarterly report. I added this information to my growing dossier. Not intentionally dishonest, perhaps, just incompetence trying to hide itself. But the board wouldn't care about intentions. "Thanks for trusting me with that, Marcus." He nodded. "You've always been straight with everyone. That means something." I smiled, but inside, I felt the pieces falling into place. Trevor was building his own downfall, brick by careless brick. I was simply cataloging the construction process. Over the following weeks, the cracks widened. Clients complained about missed deadlines. Bethany's Harrison Technologies presentation went poorly because Trevor insisted on unrealistic commitments. Financial projections slipped further from reality. But Trevor kept blaming everyone else. "This is what happens when we have aging staff resistant to change," he told the management team. "We need fresh perspectives." I smiled, letting the narrative build. Let him believe his own story. Let him think the problems existed everywhere except in his mirror. The truth was coming. Not yet, but soon. And when it arrived, it would be undeniable. I had lunch with Vincent again. "Everything's in place," he confirmed. "Malcolm's estate attorneys have completed the audit. The trust documentation is prepared. We're ready whenever you are." "The annual shareholders meeting is in 10 days, I said. "Let's schedule the revelation for then." Vincent grinned. "This is going to be spectacular." I requested a meeting with the Chief Compliance Officer, Veronica Walsh, framing it as concerns for company integrity, not as a complaint or accusation, just a veteran employee worried about operational standards. Veronica listened intently as I showed her mild inconsistencies. Trevor's approval of contracts without legal review, financial projections that didn't match underlying data, client complaints increasing under his leadership. "I'm not trying to cause problems," I said carefully. "But after 40 years here, I've seen what happens when we cut corners." Veronica took extensive notes. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Richard. We take these matters seriously." She always did. Compliance officers live for documented concerns that could become liability issues. I left her office knowing she would investigate quietly. Not enough to alert Trevor immediately, but enough to create an official record. When everything came together, there would be no way to claim ignorance. 5 days before the shareholders' meeting, disaster struck. Patterson Global, our second largest client, threatened to terminate their contract due to Trevor's oversight. He had promised them a custom integration feature without consulting our technical team. Impossible to deliver in the promised time frame. Patterson Global CEO sent a blistering email threatening legal action for breach of contract. Trevor panicked. Emergency meetings. Frantic calls. He blamed the technical team for not communicating limitations. He blamed sales for overpromising. He blamed everyone except himself. Then Veronica quietly called me into her office. "Richard, can you salvage the Patterson situation? They're asking specifically for you." "I can try," I answered calmly. "But I didn't just fix it. I spent 3 days rebuilding the relationship, proposing realistic alternatives, demonstrating technical competence Trevor lacked. And I documented everything. His impossible promises, his failure to consult experts, the contract terms he had violated. Patterson Global agreed to stay, but only if I personally managed their account going forward. Trevor had to accept those terms or lose them entirely. 2 days before the meeting, internal auditors suddenly appeared, not because of me directly, but because Patterson Global had filed a formal complaint about mismanagement before agreeing to stay. Corporate governance required investigation. The auditors requested files, emails, project documentation. They interviewed department heads and reviewed Trevor's decisions over the past year. Trevor panicked visibly. His confident swagger disappeared. He blamed everyone. The technical team for the Patterson issue, finance or the revenue projections, me for not supporting his vision. Perfect. When people panic, they make mistakes. They send offensive emails that become evidence. They contradict their previous statements. They reveal the gaps in their competence. I watched quietly from my cubicle as Trevor spiraled, knowing the real revelation was still coming. The auditors would find problems. Yes. But what waited at the shareholders' meeting would dwarf everything else. The younger employees Trevor had favored started turning on him, not intentionally or maliciously, just out of fear. When auditors asked Bethany about the Harrison Technologies projections, she truthfully explained that Trevor had pressured her to inflate the numbers. When they asked Kyle about impossible deadlines, he provided emails showing Trevor's unrealistic demands. When they interviewed Marcus about financial reporting, he showed them the revenue timing discrepancies. Fear makes people truthful. Self-preservation overrides loyalty to incompetent leaders. I was interviewed by the auditors on a Thursday afternoon. "Mr. Holloway, you've been with this company 40 years. What's your assessment of operations under Mr. Ashford's leadership?" I chose my words carefully. Trevor is ambitious and energetic. However, some decisions have been made without adequate analysis or consultation with experienced staff. I've documented several concerns. I provided them with my meticulously organized files. The lead auditor's eyebrows raised as she reviewed the evidence. "This is very comprehensive. Richard, 40 years teaches you to keep good records." I spent the weekend preparing a clean, chronological, calm presentation. No emotion, no personal grievances, just facts, missed deadlines and their root causes, incorrect financial projections with supporting documentation, client complaints with correspondence trails, compliance issues and policy violations, internal contradictions in Trevor's directives. Everything traced back to his leadership, not through accusation, but through simple timeline analysis. This happened. Then that happened, resulting in this consequence. Vince reviewed my presentation Sunday evening. Perfect, factual, damning, and impossible to dismiss. But remember, this is just the opening act. "I know," I replied. "The real revelation comes after." Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal gray one I save for important occasions. I arrived at the office early, placed my presentation materials in my briefcase, and waited. The annual shareholders meeting would begin at 10 o'clock. Trevor had no idea what was coming. The boardroom filled with directors, major shareholders, and senior management. Trevor sat at the head of the table, confident despite the recent turbulence. He had prepared a presentation about strategic pivots and short-term adjustments. He began with his typical buzzwords and optimistic projections. The board listened politely but without enthusiasm. The audit findings had shaken their confidence. Then Veronica Walsh, the compliance officer, spoke. Before we continue, there are operational concerns that need addressing. She slid copies of my report across the table to each board member. Executives' eyes widened as they read. Page after page of documented failures, each one carefully dated and sourced. Client complaints, financial discrepancies, policy violations. Trevor's face went pale. These are taken out of context. He's disgruntled about restructuring. Actually, Veronica interrupted calmly, these findings have been corroborated by our audit team and multiple department heads. The board chairman, Douglas Whitmore, looked at Trevor coldly. These are serious issues, Mr. Ashford. Trevor scrambled for explanations, contradicting himself repeatedly. Reality was shattering around him, but he still didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. Douglas turned to Veronica. Who prepared this analysis? Who saved the Patterson account and documented these operational failures? Veronica pointed at me, sitting quietly at the end of the table. Richard Halloway. He's been with Brennan Industries for 40 years, since the company's founding years. Trevor's jaw literally dropped. He had never bothered learning my history. I was just the old man he could push around. Richard. Douglas addressed me directly. Thank you for bringing these concerns forward. Your dedication to this company's integrity is noted. Just doing my job, sir, I replied calmly. Actually, a new voice interrupted from the doorway. Richard has been doing much more than his job. Everyone turned. Malcolm Brennan, our founder, stood there leaning on a cane, but smiling broadly. He had been in poor health, mostly retired, but apparently well enough for this moment. Trevor looked confused. Mr. Brennan? I thought you were. We weren't expecting you. I wouldn't miss this for anything, Malcolm said, moving slowly to an empty chair. Especially since we're about to discuss Richard's actual role in this company. Malcolm nodded to Vincent Palmer, who stood and distributed documents to each board member. 15 years ago, when Malcolm established his estate plan, he created a trust for his shares in Brennan Industries. That trust wasn't made public at his request. Vincent paused for effect. The sole trustee and beneficiary of that trust, controlling 45% of company shares, is Richard Halloway. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. You could have heard dust settling. Trevor's face went from pale to gray. What? That's impossible. Richard is he's in operations. Richard has been my partner since 1986. Malcolm interrupted firmly. When I needed capital to expand, Richard mortgaged his house to invest. When I had my first heart attack in 2009, Richard ran this company for 2 years while I recovered. We formalized our partnership through the trust to avoid public complications, but make no mistake, Richard owns nearly half of this company. Douglas looked at me with new understanding. Richard, why didn't you say something when Trevor cut your pay? I wanted to see his true character, I replied quietly. And I wanted the board to see it too, without my ownership influencing their judgment. Trevor stared at me, comprehension and horror dawning. He had bullied and humiliated the man who literally owned almost half the company. The board moved swiftly. Trevor was removed as vice president. His contract terminated for cause based on audit findings. No severance, no golden parachute. Just an escort to collect his personal items and leave. Malcolm and the board offered me the VP position. I declined. I'll accept restoration of my proper salary and title. Senior partner and chief operations advisor. But I don't want Trevor's office or his responsibilities. I just want to do what I've always done. Help this company succeed. They agreed immediately, with back pay and a formal apology. As I walked out of that boardroom, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt validated. 40 years of loyalty, expertise, and dedication have been reduced to a line item to be cut. But truth, when revealed in its proper time, carries undeniable weight. Trevor's last words of security escorted him out were bitter. You set me up. No, Trevor, I replied calmly. You set yourself up. I just documented it. That evening, I celebrated my birthday properly with my daughter and grandchildren. The cake was sweet, the company was secure, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing your worth, even when others failed to see it, was the best gift of all. Revenge didn't require rage, just patience, precision, and the confidence to let arrogance destroy itself. If you like this story, please like this video. Hit the subscribe button to this channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. There's always another story worth hearing.